Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. May all be happy. May all be free from disease. May all realize what is good. May none be subject to misery. Good morning, friends. Before we start the talk, we'll just have an opening prayer. Chant the name of the Lord and His glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean and quenched that mighty forest fire of worldly lust raging furiously within. O name, stream down in moonlight on the lotus heart, opening its cup to knowledge of thyself. O self, drown deep in the ways of His bliss, chanting His name continually, tasting His nectar at every step, bathing in His name, that bath for weary souls. Various are thy names, O Lord. In each and every name thy power resides. No times are set, no rites are needful for chanting of thy name. So vast is thy mercy. How huge then is my wretchedness, who find in this empty life and heart no devotion to thy name. O my mind, be humbler than a blade of grass. Be patient and forbearing like the tree. Take no honor to thyself, give honor to all. Chant unceasingly the name of the Lord. O Lord and soul of the universe, mine is no prayer for wealth or retinue, the playthings of lust or the toys of fame. As many times as I may be reborn, grant me, O Lord, a steadfast love for thee. A drowning man in this world's fearful ocean is thy servant, O sweet one. In thy mercy, consider him as dust beneath thy feet. Ah, how I long for the day when an instant's separation from thee, O Lord, will be as 1,000 years, when my heart burns away with its desire, and the world without thee is a heartless void. Prostrate at thy feet let me be, in unwavering devotion, neither imploring the embrace of thine arms, nor bewailing the withdrawal of thy presence, though it tears my soul asunder. O thou, who stealest the hearts of thy devotees, do with me what thou wilt, for thou art my heart's beloved, thou and thou alone. Good morning, friends. The title of today's talk is The Light That is Swami Vivekananda. For those of us that are familiar with him and have read some of his works and perhaps even some of the reminiscences from devotees and some of his admirers, you will realize that whenever he was in a room for any kind of discussion, he would be, quote, the light of the party. Because he was thought-provoking, he was bold and articulate, and he challenged our thinking with new thoughts and a deeper understanding. He elevated us with spiritual knowledge on the inherent divinity of man, and he was a man ahead of his time. But he was on a mission of man-making. He makes us look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I can do better. His goal was to help us strengthen our spiritual foundation, regardless of our religious beliefs. Then we can better weather all manner of worldly agitations that come to us in the form of misery, joys, distractions, desires, and attachments. As our minds react to all the stimuli, we are unable to experience and realize our inherent divinity, as taught by Vedanta. The main and really the only impediment is selfishness. But this selfishness comes in so many forms that we may not be conscious of. So today, in taking a practical approach in dealing with this issue, I settled on looking at privilege because it affects us on so many levels, and Swami Vivekananda shed a lot of light on this topic. It is around us every day, but we don't notice it unless leaders of society make the news. In his defense, Swami Vivekananda says, "I am no politician or political agitator, nor am I a social reformer. It is my job to fashion man. I care only for the spirit. When it is right, everything will be righted by itself." Under the sway of materialism, we behave almost inhuman to the detriment of our fellow human beings. We talk about equality and freedom, yet everyone wants some privilege or to feel entitled. It is the bane of human life, Swami says, that's where someone enjoys some advantage over someone else. It is the cause of much suffering. Materialism fuels the fire. It can make us behave with our fellow human beings in ways we didn't think was humanly possible. Yet we talk boldly about equality and freedom. Swami Vivekananda expresses a much deeper understanding of equality and freedom, as I will explain later. I'll begin by putting this topic of privilege into some historical context with the advent of Swami Vivekananda, who lived from 1863 to 1902, and comparing simultaneously occurring events in India and the United States, leading up to Swami Vivekananda's arrival in 1893 to the World Parliament of Religions held in Chicago, where he introduced Hinduism, which he called Vedanta, to the West. Narendranath Datta, the future Swami Vivekananda, was born in Calcutta, in India, 1863. India was then under British rule, and the poor masses were suffering. But it was also dark times in the United States and US history. This country was in the middle of the American Civil War. Abraham Lincoln was president. He wanted to abolish slavery because he felt it was morally wrong, yet it was constitutionally legal. That put him in a dilemma. The South consisted of 7 slave states who felt it was their constitutional right to keep slaves, 4 million African slaves. They were doing much of the manual labor of the southern farms and plantations. They were selected as, several would be selected as house servants. Others were trained as craftsmen, blacksmiths, carpenters, shoemakers, weavers, etc. Their role was forced labor in an economy that could not exist without them. The South didn't want to be told by politicians in the North what to do, and they felt it was their right to keep slaves. And they felt that their right to keep slaves was being trampled upon now. Then it was only a question of time when other rights would be taken away? Would they be forced to give up their land or their way of life? So they fought to secede from the country so that they could have their own constitution. In terms of lives lost in any war, it remains the deadliest war in American history. The Civil War ended shortly after Lincoln's assassination in 1865. It took another 12 years for the political reintegration of the nation, during which time a stock market crash set off financial panic in 1873. It triggered economic depression in Europe and North America. It was also during this time that some major inventions brought this country closer together. And this period marked the beginning of the technological age. A cheaper way of making steel aided in tool making and manufacturing. Electrical power distribution and electrification of factories made manufacturing less expensive. Electric lights were cheaper to operate than gas and kerosene lights. Factories could work longer hours and produce more. This brought prices down, and the common man could afford tools to work the land and make useful products and sell them. It was now cost-effective to build steel tracks for the railways, and cross-country railway systems allowed for the unprecedented movement of people and ideas. It also meant the transportation of energy in the form of coal. And the telegraph and telephone connected people across the country. Hope was everywhere for a bright future. The country was becoming united. Slavery was abolished, but was still present in some states. But former slaves could work hard and earn and secure their future. And education was opened up in some places. More people left the farms and plantations and moved to the cities for work, a new life, and hopefully a prosperous one. Immigrants fleeing oppression in their homeland or looking forward to a better future were arriving to this new land of opportunity. Meanwhile, in India, Narendra, the future Swami Vivekananda, was highly educated and expected to become a lawyer like his father. While 15 or 16 years old, Narendra was encouraged by his father to meet and discuss various intellectual topics with notable scholars. Topics considered beyond the interests of normal boys his age. Through these discussions, he learned some valuable lessons, such as the art of grasping and understanding the essentials of things, seeing truth from the widest and most comprehensive standpoints, and holding on to the real issues under discussion. About his scholarship, one of his professors, a Professor Hasty, once remarked, "Narendra is a real genius. I have traveled far and wide, but have not yet come across a lad of his talent and possibilities. Even among the philosophical students in the German universities, he is bound to make his mark in life." Early on in his life, he was recognized to be a leader amongst men. His English education opened his eyes, as well as the eyes of other youths of his time, especially to the shortcomings of their society. The caste system was entrenched in it, and people suffered because of it. especially the lower castes and outcasts. They could never make their lives better. Priests controlled the religious life of the people for their own selfish interests, while meaningless dogmas and lifeless rituals replaced the inspiring teachings of the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita. The masses were being exploited by the wealthy landlords. But the suffering the women had to go through was especially pitiable. Many were uneducated. Early marriage before puberty could be to an older man who dies soon. The girl would then become a widow, and society would not allow her to remarry or have children. And she would be forced and shunned by society to live as a nun. Among the British educated youths, some would be more British than the British. Others wanted to help their homeland, to their motherland. Some of those would join one of the several reform movements. In Narendra's case, he joined a liberal religious organization known as the Brahmo Samaj. They discarded many of the Hindu rituals as well as the worship of God through images, but dedicated themselves instead to the worship and adoration of the eternal, the unsearchable, the immutable being, who is the author and preserver of the universe. God was formless but personal. They had no faith in scriptural authority or avatars. They emphasized the Western rational method of solving India's problems. Their main energy was directed toward the emancipation of women through the remarriage of widows, abolishing early marriage, and the spread of education to the masses. Morality and character building was also very important. Narendra accepted all these doctrines, but it was not enough to satisfy him. With all his education and rationality, he also had deep spiritual yearning. He wanted to know if anyone had actually seen God, or was it all hallucination or fantasy? Professor Hasty had mentioned to Narendra the name of Sri Ramakrishna as one of the rare individuals who must have experienced communion with God. When Narendra eventually visited Sri Ramakrishna, he asked him, "Have you seen God?" The honesty and sincerity of his answer captivated him. "Yes, not only have I seen God more clearly than not only have I seen God, I see him more clearly than I see you in front of me." Narendra spent the next 5 years learning about the teachings of Vedanta under this almost illiterate saint, steeped in those ancient teachings and traditions. That seemed to contradict his Western education at times, but he could not deny Sri Ramakrishna's purity and sincerity. There was a broad-mindedness not present in other so-called saints, because Sri Ramakrishna had followed the religious practices of the different Hindu sects, as well as Islam and Christianity. He realized that all these paths led to the same God. Only that God was given different names. He declared that all faiths, sincerely followed, lead to the same God. He was no longer, Swami Vivekananda, or Narendra, was no longer interested in becoming a lawyer, or a man of the world. He formally received sannyasa, or took his final vows from Sri Ramakrishna, and he was now an all-renouncing monk, seeking no pleasure in the world. After Sri Ramakrishna passed away in 1886, Narendra traveled throughout India and saw the plight of the poor and suffering masses being taken advantage of by leaders, landowners, and priests. Their entitlement made them behave like brutes. He appealed to the rajas, the kings of the small kingdoms, and wealthy landowners to help the poor with basic needs and education. Using his skills in philosophical argument, quoting from the scriptures and explaining their meaning in detail, they understood he was no ordinary monk. He so impressed them that they were compelled to listen. Some helped him and some didn't. One such Raja told him of a World Parliament of Religions being held in Chicago, and that he should attend it as a representative of Hinduism. This king also offered to help fund the trip. Swami Vivekananda, after much thought, decided that he would go, because he felt confident that India would recover from her present condition, because religion was her backbone, a spiritual foundation built over thousands of years. When Swami Vivekananda came to the US in 1893, he was 30 years old. He saw a new nation barely 200 years old, a land of opportunity. It was a nation struggling to live up to its ideals of equality and freedom. He saw prosperity growing amongst all classes of human beings. This new country was viewed by future immigrants as the new land of freedom and opportunity. Anyone willing to work could achieve the American dream. Freedom meant the opportunity for prosperity and success achieved through hard work. That you were also free to make individual choices without restriction from your former home, regardless of your caste or class, religion, race, or ethnicity, as long as you respected each other's search for that same happiness. It was a land that believed in educating its masses, where jobs were available and opportunities given to everyone to be the best they could be, whether in the arts and sciences, the technologies, or in labor and industry. You could be a janitor, a construction worker, an Edison, a Rockefeller, a Ford or an Einstein, or even the President of the United States. There was dignity of labor, regardless of the type of work one did. America was proud of her economic recovery and its open invitation to immigrants. The country was growing while Europe was still in financial distress. As a way of showcasing their technological advancement to the rest of the world, the idea of a World's Fair to be held in Chicago was born. Christian leaders felt this was also a good opportunity to add a World Parliament of Religions, so that the world could see the superiority of the Christian faith. That by accepting Christianity, they too could become rich and successful. Swami Vivekananda understood that all eyes were on the US, especially given the spectacular event of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair and the World Parliament of Religions. Where else in the world would such an event have been possible? This freedom of speech? Nowhere. Not all the representatives understood that the intent was to try to prove Christianity's superiority over their religion until it was well underway. But nonetheless, Swami Vivekananda opened his address with "Sisters and Brothers of America," and he did so to great applause. None of the other representatives before him received such a welcome or standing ovation, and it created some jealousy. He concluded with, "The present convention, which is one of the most august assemblies ever held, is in itself a vindication, a declaration to the world of the wonderful doctrine preached in the Gita. Whosoever comes to me through whatsoever form, I reach him. All men are struggling through paths which in the end lead to me. Sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant, fanaticism, have long possessed this beautiful earth. They have filled the earth with violence, drenched it often and often with human blood, destroying civilization, and sent whole nations to despair. Had it not been for these horrible demons, human society would be far more advanced than it is now. But their time has come, and I fervently hope that the bell that tolled this morning in honor of this convention will be the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with the sword or with the pen, and of all uncharitable feelings between persons wending their way toward the same goal." He spent time visiting different parts of the exhibition. He saw the advancements of science and technology and understood how they could help remove the poverty he saw in India. But his keen intellect looked behind the scenes as he saw a nation struggling to live up with its ideals of equality and freedom in a materialistic society without any firm spiritual foundation. He said, "The whole of Western civilization will crumble to pieces in the next 50 years if there is no spiritual foundation. It is hopeless and perfectly useless to attempt to govern mankind with the sword. You will find that the very centers from which such ideas are governed, where such ideas as government by force sprang up, are the first centers to degrade, degenerate, and crumble to pieces." As a side note, about 20 years after this, World War I occurred, and 25 years after that, World War II. But there is an obstacle that has ruined many a good idea over the ages. As he points out, privilege is the bane of human life. He saw privilege wreak havoc in Indian society, but he knew she could recover because of her spiritual foundation built over thousands of years. He recognized that privilege was now wreaking havoc in this new nation, but this nation did not have the same spiritual foundation. He describes two forces constantly at work. One, creating privilege, as is the nature of this material world, and the other, breaking down privilege. And wherever privilege is broken down, more and more light and progress come to a race. The world will always be in this constant state of going back and forth. For example, bullying tactics, the strong overpowering the weak. If I exert my strength and power over you, you will succumb. You will fear me. You will respect me. You will do as I say and give me what I want because I think I deserve it. This attitude seems to be only getting more and more magnified. And what about wealth? If a man has more money than another, he wants some privilege over those who have less. Perhaps it starts out with a closer parking spot or free parking. There is a saying that knowledge is power. One man knows more than others, so he claims more privilege. And he uses that knowledge to control others to get his ways. The worst and most tyrannical, Swami Vivekananda says, is the privilege of spirituality. If some persons think that they know more of spirituality, know more of God, they claim a superior privilege over everyone else. They say, "Come down and worship us, ye common herds. We are the messengers of God, and you have to worship us." That's a quote from Swami Vivekananda. This is akin to religious leaders asking payment for spiritual instruction or relief from their suffering. They are employing superstition over truth to manipulate the suffering masses. They themselves have no spiritual experience, but with that money they expand their ministry, they expand their name and fame, and buy expensive cars. In Hindu scriptures, this is strictly forbidden to take money or take anything in exchange for spiritual instruction. But some so-called gurus have justified it anyway, especially in the West when we don't know any different. And Swami continues, none can be Vedantists and at the same time admit to privilege to anyone, either mental, physical, or spiritual. Absolutely no privilege for anyone. The same power is in every man, in one manifesting more, in another less. The same potentiality is in everyone. Where is the claim for privilege? All knowledge is in every soul, even in the most ignorant. He has not manifested it yet. But perhaps he has not had the opportunity. Perhaps the environments were not suitable to him. When he gets the opportunity, he will manifest it. The idea that one man is born superior to another has no meaning in the Vedanta. Put them in the same circumstances and see whether the same intelligence comes out or not. Before that, you have no right to say that one person or nation is superior to another. And as to spirituality, no privilege should be claimed there. It is a privilege to serve mankind, for this is the worship of God. God is here, in all these human souls. He is the soul of man. What privilege can men ask? This practical side of Vedanta morality is necessary as much today as it ever was. More necessary, perhaps, than it ever was. For all this privilege claiming has become tremendously intensified with the extension of knowledge. Excess of knowledge and power without holiness makes human beings devils. Tremendous power is being acquired by the manufacture of machines and other appliances, and privilege is claimed today as it never has been claimed in the history of the world. This is why the Vedanta wants to preach against it, to break down this tyrannizing over the souls of men. and bring more light to the human race. By the way, these are quotes of Swami Vivekananda, not my own, but yet I believe what he's saying. We are becoming more and more busy about looking at our neighbors and less about looking at ourselves. The world will change if we change. If we are pure, the world will become pure. The question is, why I should see evil in others. I cannot see evil unless I be evil. I cannot be miserable unless I am weak. Things that used to make me miserable when I was a child do not do so now. All these things which we call causes of misery and evil, we shall laugh at when we arrive at that wonderful state of equality, that sameness. This is what is called in Vedanta attaining to freedom. The sign of approaching that freedom is more and more of this sameness and equality. In misery and happiness, the same. In success and defeat, the same. Such a mind is nearing that state of freedom. In other words, maintaining mental equanimity in all circumstances. Swami Vivekananda is presenting equality and freedom from the spiritual standpoint. From the social standpoint, the enjoyment of privileges undermines equality and freedom. Yet, as individuals, we can change that by not indulging in it ourselves. One might ask, what if I receive some privilege unsought for as a result of being in a particular situation or as a result of performing some action? Should I then not accept privilege? Maybe we did some work resulting in us receiving opportunities not available to others. Or perhaps we know people in certain positions, automatically granting us certain privileges. Or we may be born in a life of privilege and not realize it until we have the opportunity to compare our lives to others. If we have empathy, we will see privilege for what it is and then decide. Privilege is the enjoyment of any advantage over another person. In the practical sense, if you gloat over, brag about, inflict harm, find joy in the suffering of others, and believe yourself to be better than others, then you are claiming privilege. It is a selfish state of mind that we need to work on. Everyone will have their different advantages, some inborn, some learned, and some earned. That is the variety of life, and I would say, the freedom of life's expression. Equal privilege and opportunity for all beings is the underlying unity or equality behind that expression. How we use the advantages we have, that is important. The less selfish we are, the better for us. So what are the implications? Any privilege received unsought for only adds to our responsibility and should not be gloated about. You can share it or work to make it the society norm. Then it becomes a worker's right or a human right, and is no longer a privilege for a select few. Or you can renounce it. When we look at the world today, it is not unreasonable to think that the cause of human degradation is that we accept privilege as normal. We let it run amok for decades or centuries until the havoc it has wreaked is now beyond mortal control. We accepted small privileges, then before we knew it, we were accepting more and more because we felt deserving and entitled to them, only leading us to more and more selfishness. And yet we endlessly complain about the state of the world and blame it on everyone but ourselves. Sri Ramakrishna says, "A man who spends his time in discussing the good and bad qualities of others simply wastes his time. For it is time spent neither in thinking about one's own self or soul, nor the Supreme Self or God, but in fruitless thinking of others' selves." Holy Mother says, "If you want peace, my child, don't look into the faults of others. Rather, look into your own faults." And Swami Vivekananda says, "Do not talk of the wickedness of the world and all its sins. Weep that you are bound to see wickedness yet. Weep that you are bound to see sin everywhere. And if you are bound to help the world, do not condemn it. Do not weaken it more. For what is sin and what is misery? And what are all these things but the results of weakness? The world is made weaker and weaker every day with such teachings. Let positive, strong, helpful thoughts enter into their brains from very childhood. Lay yourselves open to these thoughts and not to weakening and paralyzing ones." Tolstoy said, "Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself." Swami Vivekananda continues, "What can be attained is elimination of privilege. That is really the work before the whole world. In all social lives there has been that one fight in every race and in every country. The difficulty is not that one body of men is naturally more intelligent than another, but whether this body of men, because they have the advantage of intelligence, should take away even physical enjoyment from those who do not possess that advantage. The fight is to destroy that privilege, that some will be stronger physically than others and will thus naturally be able to subdue or defeat the weak, is a self-evident fact. But that, because of this strength, they should gather unto themselves all the attainable happiness of this life is not according to law. And the fight has been against it. That some people, through natural aptitude, should be able to acquire more wealth than others is natural. But on account of this power, to acquire wealth that should tyrannize and ride roughshod over those who cannot acquire such wealth is not part of the law, and the fight has been against it. The enjoyment of advantage over another is privilege, and throughout ages, the aim of morality has been its destruction. This is the work that tends toward sameness, toward unity, without destroying variety. Yet all these variations remain eternally. It is the very essence of life. We shall all play in this way eternally. You will be wealthy, and I shall be poor. You will be strong, and I shall be weak. You will be learned, and I ignorant. You will be spiritual, and I less so. But what of that? Let us remain so. but because you are physically or intellectually stronger, you must not have more privilege than I. And that you have more wealth is no reason why you should be considered greater than I, for that sameness is here, in spite of the different conditions. The same power is in every man, the one manifesting more, the other less. The same potentiality is in everyone. Where is the claim for privilege? All knowledge is in every soul, even the most ignorant. He has not manifested it, but perhaps he has not had the opportunity, the environments, or perhaps were not suitable for him. And when he gets that opportunity, he will manifest it. The idea that one man is born superior to another has no meaning in the Vedanta. That between two nations, one is superior and the other is inferior has no meaning whatsoever. Put them in the same circumstances and see whether the same intelligence comes out. Before that, you have no right to say that one nation is superior to another. And as to spirituality, no privilege should be claimed there. Again, it is a privilege to serve mankind, for this is the worship of God. God is here and in all these human souls. He is the soul of man. What privilege can men ask? His words of wisdom evolved from his deeper understanding of the ancient scriptures of India and the teachings he learned from his guru, Sri Ramakrishna. His words are as relevant today as they were back then. Given the emotional turmoil we are witnessing around the world today, his teachings seem all the more relevant. So what is the light that is Swami Vivekananda? It is that bright ray of hope for humanity that will break down privileges so that every soul, so that every individual in the human race can progress to their destiny and experience equality and freedom in that one infinite God, the ultimate truth, which Vedanta declares is the birthright of every being, regardless of race, caste, intelligence, or any other differences that seek to divide us. It all starts with the individual, when we can look at ourselves in the mirror and say, I can do better. Thank you. We have a few announcements. Swami Satchidananda will return from Chicago on Tuesday and will be giving the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna class on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. here in the chapel and also streaming live online. This coming Friday, we will be having a new direct disciple, householder disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, Rani Rasmani, who was the founder of the Dakshineshwar temple, where Sri Ramakrishna eventually became the priest. And I'm not sure what the Sunday talk is next Sunday, but what is the Guru? And Swami Satchidananda will be giving that talk. So thank you all very much for coming or attending online. And I will conclude with a chant. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. May all be happy, may all be free from disease, may all realize what is good, may none be subject to misery. Om, peace, peace, peace to all beings.